everyone, welcome to the I Heart Podcast. My name is Jonathan North, and this month, I Heart Christmas. Today's the final day of July, and the final day of this year's Christmas in July, and this last episode is one of my favorites. My cousin Sarah is joining me, and we're talking about Meet Me in St. Louis. I was unfamiliar with this movie before last year when Sarah introduced it to me, but since then it has really grown on me. So when I was trying to think of the best way to finish Christmas in July for the year, I thought this would be perfect, because Meet Me in St. Louis is just as much about summer as it is winter. It's just as Christmassy as it is not Christmassy, so I thought it'd be the perfect film to transition back into regular movies. Plus, it's always fun to talk about movies with Sarah. Okay, so first I want to go through all the main characters because there are a lot of them, and we can talk about them or just name them off just to get them out there because I was having trouble keeping names straight, so I just wrote them all down for myself.
Probably know them better than I do at this point.
Maybe, I don't know. It's the Smith family, which I did not remember that their last name was Smith, which is such a generic name. I guess that's probably why I forgot it. The father is Alonzo, and everybody calls him Lonnie. Mother is Anna. And I did not ever hear a name for the grandfather. Did you hear a name, or is he just grandfather?
I think just grandfather, but I didn't realize that the dad's name was Alonzo. The oldest brother is named Alonzo, isn't he?
He's a junior. His name, everybody calls him Lon.
Or Lonnie.
Yeah. I guess they're both called Lonnie at times, but yeah, he's the junior. And then I think the eldest is Rose.
Yes, what about the mother, though?
Anna.
Anna, okay.
And then I wasn't sure if it was Lon next or Esther.
Lonnie would be older.
Okay. Because there's 3 teenagers.
I think.
And then 2 little kids, Agnes and Tootie. I don't know if Tootie is short for something.
Because wasn't the one party was it Lonnie's graduation?
The first party in the first, the second scene?
Like when the neighbor comes over.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't really get that there was a reason for the party. I just thought that they were throwing a party.
Yeah, I think that it might have been for... This is so terrible. I've seen this so many times. But I think it was for his graduation, and it was an excuse to get the cute neighbor boy over. And
then the last, I guess she's sort of a member of the family, is the maid, Katie.
Yes.
She's basically a member of the family,
yes,
even though she's working for them. So that's the main characters.
But I'd also say that the neighbor is the neighbor boy.
Yeah, well, there's multiple suitors that come up throughout the whole thing, but the neighbor boy is the main.
Really, since Esther is the main character and her love interest is John Truitt, and he's so involved in the story, even Rose's boyfriend isn't as involved as John Truitt. Rose's boyfriend is important, but he's not, they could have had the whole story without him even. He's an interesting subplot.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's kind of a background character that is important but rarely seen.
And so is even Lonnie, his love interest.
Yeah.
But she's not, you could still have
Was
the story.
she even mentioned before winter, though? We're kind of getting ahead of ourselves.
I feel like she was.
Okay, because, by the time winter came around, they were talking about, well, we can get to that when we get there.
Sure.
It starts in the summer, and the whole main first scene is the proposal. I guess Esther kind of has it in her head that Rose is going to be proposed to over the phone by Warren Sheffield, which sounds like some kind of rich oil baron, but he's really a teenager who lives in New York.
You're probably college age.
Yeah.
Handsome young man. And it's being totally blown out of proportion. I'd like to just note that I never thought of this as a Christmas movie. I don't typically watch this around Christmas time. Mm-hmm. It's a year in the life of, really the main point of this, aside from romance or whatever, is centered around the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. So yes, it has these different holidays in it. If you view it as a Christmas movie, fine. But you do not need to have this as a Christmas ritual. You can totally watch this in October or spring or watch it at fair time,
Yeah, because, I had heard about this as a Christmas movie, but once we actually sat down to watch it, I was like, this really doesn't feel like a Christmas movie, except for the one scene.
And they don't play it at Christmas time. If you took It's a Wonderful Life and you didn't play it at Christmas time, that might not feel like a Christmas movie to me either. If I had watched this around Christmas time growing up, I would probably associate it that way, but I didn't. So
Probably. Maybe the people who I've heard mentioning it as a Christmas movie just watched it at Christmas time.
yeah. And it has one of the most famous Christmas songs ever in it. So you can get that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
The other thing that this whole first scene revolves around is making ketchup. Which was kind of weird because what they were making to me did not look like ketchup.
It's homemade.
But it looked like soup. And, the grandfather even comes in and he thinks it's too thick. And I was already thinking this stuff looks way too runny to be ketchup.
Everybody had an opinion. The thing about this movie is that it's one of those stories that kind of revolves around daily life. So if there was a person watching this, say, in the 1940s that had grown up in that time, it would be a major nostalgia trip. You have the sister coming in basically in her underwear which is a lot more underwear back then, from swimming. Tootie's out on the ice wagon. I mean, major nostalgia right there. You have Grandpa living with the family, the maid, they're cooking, they're all together, they're having their little dramas unfold. And that's a lot of the movie, is just daily life and the little nutty things that happen in daily life.
There was a lot of little nutty things that happened in this movie, particularly from the children.
Yeah, this movie helps to blow away the notion that all children back in the day were just totally under control by their parents and didn't have any attitude. There are people today that would probably be horrified by some of the behavior of the children in this movie. I mean, they're still a very sweet family.
Yeah. I mean, I would be horrified if I saw these kids acting this way, but I still loved them.
It's very funny.
Yeah.
But the two youngest especially are very, very naughty. And they're not serious about a lot of it. Towards the beginning, one of the girls is looking for her cat, and then the maid is saying that I think that she kicked the cat down the cellar stairs and she could hear its spine hitting every step. And then the girl responds by saying that she was going to have the maid torn apart by two horses or something.
I actually wrote that quote down. She says, "If you killed her, I'll kill you. I'll stab you to death in your sleep and tie you between two wild horses until you're pulled apart."
And then the maid's like, "There's your cat." And everything's fine.
The maid was completely unaffected that this small child had just threatened to stab her to death.
But honestly, the maid had just been horrible. But they didn't mean much. It's not that serious between the two of them.
Yeah.
So, no, do not talk to people the way the maid talked or way the child talked. But it's like a showcase of, wow, they were naughty. And Tootie, I don't know if part of this would be a product of the times. She'd pretty much be a goth today. She's this adorable Margaret O'Brien, just a little Margaret O'Brien, absolutely adorable. And she loves death and diseases.
I kept writing down a whole bunch of quotes throughout the whole movie because she has so many great lines.
Yeah, she starts out singing "Bright in the Corner Where You Are," but she's telling the Iceman about how her doll has 4 fatal diseases, and he's like, "And it only takes one." And
and then she says, "But she's gonna have a beautiful funeral."
Yeah, she has a bunch of dead, quote unquote, dolls, and yeah, she loves the drama of death and suffering, but yeah, somehow they managed to make that funny.
So the main plot of this is all revolving around trying to get dinner over with quickly so that Rose can accept a phone call which supposedly will contain a proposal of marriage. And the maid got in a line that I loved, which she's going to be proposed to over the phone, apparently. And the maid says, "Personally, I would be loath to accept a proposal from a man who proposed to me over an
The family dynamic is interesting here because the father is very much, he's out there, he's the hardworking provider, and he's a little bit short-tempered, and then the mother is just like the rock of the family. She's sweet, she keeps everything calm, where would they be without her? I mean, they have to smooth all of this over because the guy didn't propose, but really, even though the father is quick-tempered, you always come back to the part of, like, he really loves his family. Like, he got upset because they were trying to hurry dinner, and then he found out what was going on, and it didn't go the way they thought it was going to go, and he's like, from now on, he was going to answer all the telephone calls. And then the phone goes off, and he's like, you answer that, Rose. He's like, you can tell, even with his blustery temper, that he really loves his family, and he's not out to be a tyrant. But really, the person who helps to smooth everything and keep everybody on course is the mother. And, she and her husband really love each other. And it's really sweet. The family dynamic is very sweet and funny. It should also be mentioned that the ultimate star of this film, no matter how many people you recognize, is Judy Garland. Judy Garland had already done a bunch of young person roles, and I don't think she was even that old. She might have been early mid-20s when this came around, and she was supposed to be playing a teenager. She was over it. Like, she did not want to do this part, but I don't know who convinced her, but they did. I don't know if it was his name Vincent Minnelli, if he was the one to convince her or not. And it was during the filming of this that he actually proposed to her too. So I don't know if he softened her up to actually do one more juvenile role, but...
So I'm assuming that she was not a teenager when it was recorded.
I think she was somewhere in her 20s.
Okay, well, I was thinking that about a lot of the teenage
She was
characters.
tired of doing those roles. And, she had already been married, probably divorced at that point. She'd been through some stuff, so that probably made that role even less appealing. But she does a really good job with it.
Yeah, definitely.
And definitely the star of the film. And she's kind of the mover, shaker, plotter of the family, at least between her and her sister.
Yeah. Well, this whole thing was sort of engineered by her.
Yes.
Even though it ultimately turned out that she was completely wrong about the whole thing.
Yes. And that's just that sets the stage for her personality, and she's conniving, but in a relatively harmless way.
There was also a little thing before the dinner scene with her and the neighbor. Like, there's a neighbor that just moved in that doesn't really even know she exists, but she's in love with him.
Yeah.
And like at first when I saw him, it was like, so does this guy live alone? Because this guy was one of the few teenage characters who actually looked like a teenager. I was thinking, this guy is way too young to be a homeowner. And also he was smoking a pipe.
It's just interesting, the things that go through your head that do not go through my head at all.
But then I heard somebody later on in the movie say Mrs. Truitt. So I was like, well, he must live with his parents then. We just never see them.
No, which is kind of odd. You would think that they might come into play, but any of the love interests, their parents never come into play. For whatever reason, they didn't make them central.
Yeah, I guess it didn't really matter, but it just was momentarily confusing for me.
Just, kids, if you get into a relationship, meet the family.
So then we have the whole dinner scene, and this is where Tootie has some really great lines, and I wrote them all down because I didn't want to forget any of them. The first one happens when it's not even the line itself, it's the reaction to something else. You hear a crash upstairs.
And thumping.
And she turns and says, now I remember where I left my other skate.
Yes, the poor dad.
And the dad comes down and he gives her the skate and says he went for a ride before dinner. And I don't remember exactly what this one was about, but I think she was trying to change the subject, and she said, hello, Papa, I buried Maud Rockefeller today. You missed all the fun.
Oh, my goodness, you caught more of that line than I did. There are people who would be horrified at this, but the part that I find rather hilarious, there's more than one part that's funny about that scene, is when her dad says, because of the skate incident, remind me to spank you after dinner. And then there's this little pause, and she turns to her sister and she's like, if I forget, you remind me. Like, she's totally okay with getting punished for this. And then there's also a scene at the dinner table where I think maybe they'd had it. I don't know if it was before she got in trouble or whether they were having an awkward silence, and she was saying, so-and-so saw a drunkard get shot and the blood spurted 3 feet.
Yeah. I think that was an instance of her trying to change the subject from something.
Yeah, things that you would be probably horrified if your child was taking delight in them.
There was a lot of things about her that would kind of be horrifying, but for some reason with her it was adorably hilarious.
Yeah, you gotta wonder. Anyway.
Well, ultimately that scene ends with the phone call coming through and no proposal happens.
But they smooth it over, like, this was something that he actually called long distance.
Yes.
They made it was pretty cute.
Yeah. So then we have the party, and like I said, I didn't realize there was an actual reason for the party, because they talk about parties later on in the movie too. I just assumed that parties were a thing that they did, like on a semi-regular basis.
Which I think back in the day they would have been, because, I mean, we want to hang out with our friends now, and back in the day, you have to have some, you're not going to Netflix. So, yes, you're going to have food, music, dancing, games.
And this is where Esther formally meets the neighbor, John Truitt.
And acts like she doesn't know who he is. So, totally a chick.
I felt like, I don't think it was ever said, but the way Lon was looking at her, I thought he was annoyed that she was pretending not to know who he was.
Like, yeah, right, sissy.
And we get another hilarious Tootie scene when she and Agnes sneak down and she ends up singing a song about being drunk for some reason.
Yes.
Horrifying her sister, but everyone loves it.
Yes. I was drunk last night, dear mother. I was drunk the night before. But if you'll forgive me, mother, I'll never get drunk anymore.
And then they do a dance, she and Esther.
Do a cakewalk.
Yes, I really liked that scene. There's just something about it. They were so good dancing together. It was really cute and fun. Like, I wasn't totally into all the songs. Like, some were kind of hit or miss for me. I really liked some, and others I could just, meh. This is one that I really liked.
I could see that because it's an old romantic film. Like, it's probably not all your thing. Yeah.
Even though the whole film was not all my thing, I really have grown to find myself really liking this movie.
It has Tootie in it, which just kind of, I think, strikes a chord with you.
Even beyond just Tootie, though, it's just, it's a good movie. It's well written and well acted. It's just, I really like it.
Everybody's leaving, and Esther has hidden John Truitt's hat in the bread box, and I think it's a raisin on it.
I think there was multiple raisins on it, because I saw him picking more than one thing off of it.
And she acts all innocent about it, but she was either trying to keep it as a souvenir or delay him.
It seemed like she was trying to delay him, and like she didn't even try to pretend that she hadn't hidden it, because she says, oh, it was right where I put it, or right where I left it. Something like that.
That's honest.
Yeah. And he didn't really question it except for the raisins.
John was kind of innocent.
Yeah, well, I think he was also returning her feelings, so he was fine with whatever she was going to do.
Which, if he is a teenage boy, it's only natural that he not pick up on all the nuances and be totally suave, which he was not.
No.
I love, like, she wants him to go around and turn the lights down with her, and this is totally teenage girl, teenage boy type dynamic where she's all fluttering, and he's awkward.
Well, and then the thing about the perfume, too.
That's what I'm saying, like, when he's saying, oh, he likes her perfume. It's the kind that his grandmother wears. Guys, Do not say that. Do not say that your love interest reminds you of your grandmother. Unless you really find a way to make that suave, then you're treading on dangerous ground. And they have sort of an awkward handshake, and he says that she has a strong grip for a girl, and he's really friendly about it and everything, but he's kind of awkward teenage boy.
The last scene of them like parting for the night, I thought it was hilarious because it was obvious that she wanted a kiss, but she got a handshake instead, and she was just completely annoyed about it, like very annoyed.
Bye, neighbor.
Then we get the trolley scene, which is basically just the trolley song, although John Truitt comes in at the end, I believe.
And that was one of Judy Garland's most iconic songs, believe it or not.
Okay.
Like, she kept singing that through the years. And this is where it came from.
The main reason that I recognize this song is because it was on some Disney album sung by Minnie Mouse.
Okay. Well, you heard it from us. This is where it came from.
Yeah, I figured that.
And there was a scene cut of she and John. I don't know if John sang it all, but she would have sang a song at the fairgrounds, but they didn't keep it for the final movie.
That would take place after the trolley scene?
Yes.
Okay, because I did think that scene was rather short. It was basically the song.
And it would have, they probably should have kept it because it would have shown more development in their relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it might have been called Boys and Girls Like You and Me or something. That's probably totally the wrong title, but now you know it exists. And it was a thing, but it didn't stay.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Well, the next scene is like the next section of the movie. It's autumn, 1903, and it's Halloween. And this is the weirdest Halloween that I've ever seen. Apparently Halloween was different back in the early 1900s.
See, here's the thing, and this is please people, care about history. You can say learn history so that it won't repeat itself, but you always have a majority of people who don't give a rip about history, so it's going to repeat itself anyway. It's inevitable. So, for your own benefit, enjoyment, whatever, learn about history, but you can't foist it on everyone. And as far as holidays go, there's generally some really interesting past involved that people don't think about today. And Halloween has this whole long history, and even into 20th century America, it was a much, I view it as a very dark holiday, but the dynamic was different. I think it might have even been mid-century or earlier where vandalism was a huge problem.
Definitely, and you could see that with what they were doing.
And I don't know how it was at this period in time, but the kids are basically running wild and free.
And none of the adults seemed to even care. It was like the grandfather was encouraging them.
And they're out there with a bonfire, kids at the oldest, maybe very early teens, but probably 12 and under.
And the bonfire seemed to be made of furniture.
And it's very destructive. It's very dark. You're not really trick-or-treating. They're going around throwing flour on people to kill them. And
I was going to ask, it didn't seem like the trick-or-treating actually involved candy.
They have to kill them, quote-unquote, so otherwise they might have the banshees haunt them forever. It's meant to be very dark. And there are people that enjoy that. I personally am not a fan of Halloween.
But did Tootie think that she was actually killing people? Because at the one point, there's this whole plot about somebody named Mr. Brokoff who Agnes and Tootie think poisons and burns cats for some reason.
Which you can tell that he's totally a nice man.
Yeah.
He acts tough as Tootie is throwing flour on him, and then you can see him giving this sort of warm paternal smile as she's running off, and his dog is eating the flour on the floor.
All the children seem to be terrified of this guy because they're all talking about who's going to be the one to go and...
But they're obviously generating drama. They want the drama of making up evil and everything. And I don't know how to fully communicate how much these children are delighting in dark subject matter.
Well, when she comes back and she seems traumatized, all the kids are cheering and saying that she's the most horrible, and then she's so happy about it.
Yeah. I'm the most horrible. I'm the most horrible. And I think she might have been throwing stuff on the bonfire. By the way, a bunch of, 12 and under with a giant bonfire out in the street, unsupervised, might not be the best.
That was like the main reason that I was wondering, like, where are the parents? Like,
And
why are they okay with
And
these
I
children?
think I think that's one of the things about this movie that would make it historically interesting, because this movie was based off of a book about somebody's real childhood.
Okay.
And so when you look at a lot of these things going on, they're probably a pretty good window into the culture and family life of the time. Maybe they would have changed stuff, but I bet that this Halloween scene really helps you get a feel of what Halloween was like back in the day. Now, people are paranoid about their kids getting hurt from candy, and they're supervised, rightly so. There are a bunch of weirdos out there. I don't like the holiday anyway. I would rather just have a party for fall with people that I know and eat candy there. And
It's always like, we didn't really do much for Halloween when I was a kid, so it's always seemed weird to me to go begging to strangers for candy.
So, as far as all the and well, this gets even more complicated, because she and her sister and whoever all else stuff some clothes to look like a body and put it on, I think, the trolley track.
Mm-hmm.
And John Truitt drags Tootie away because he doesn't want her to get in trouble with the police. In the meantime, she pulls out a clump of his hair, and somewhere in there she does fall down and cut her lip, and she's bawling, and she tells this whole bag of lies about how John Truitt tried to kill her, and it's only later that they find out, like, Agnes comes in and says that, oh, I don't know if the trolley went off the track or not.
It didn't seem like it did.
But she's delightedly telling about this whole ruckus that has been created.
Mm-hmm.
And Rose says, you might have killed dozens of people. Well, before they find out what actually happened, Esther thinks that John is this bully, and she goes over and beats on him about as best as she can. She's not Attila the Hun by any means, but
she does end up kind of injuring him.
She biffs him around and bites him, and then goes home, and he's trying to hold her off, and her sleeve gets torn. The doctor comes and takes care of Tootie. Anyway, when they find out that this has all been a lie, the kids don't care. They start talking over whoever's trying to rebuke them, and
Mm-hmm.
Rose starts laughing like they've just been up to no good, and Esther starts laughing too, and in my mind it's like, this is not laughable.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
You committed vandalism. You're just little kids. You could have literally killed a bunch of people. You lied about somebody trying to kill you and ripped out part of his hair. I mean, this is all extremely ugly and extremely worthy of punishment beyond whatever
Mm-hmm.
she did to herself with her lip.
But then they don't even want to tell the dad.
Oh, well,
It's
that's another aside. Well, then Esther realizes, oh my goodness, what have I done to John? And they go over and make up, and he gives her a kiss.
And invites her to beat him up again the next day.
Yeah, and then she's totally on cloud 9. Well, here's the thing. When you have a member of the family who tends to get worked up about stuff, you don't necessarily want to generate a scene. So when the dad comes home and Tootie's rambling on about everything that's happened, he's like, what? And the mother's like, she fell down and cut her lip. She's fine.
I mean, it's technically the truth, but
it is such... I mean, some people would have totally... It probably should have been a big scene of discussing this, like, really balanced parenting. They probably would have discussed everything that would have happened and had a conversation with Tootie about her behavior and figured out some sort of sensible punishment and made her apologize to John and all of these things, but the mother just smooths it over.
Mm-hmm.
And so that it's not blown into a big thing. So I'm not saying that it was handled correctly, but I can see why she handled it that way, and it was funny.
Yes. It was funny, and technically nobody got hurt, but I feel like they needed to make Tootie aware that somebody could have been hurt.
Which they tried to, but she didn't listen.
Yeah.
And so it needed to have been stressed more. But that's not the nature of this film.
Yeah.
And I think it probably also does help to illuminate just how much mischief Halloween caused back in the day. These days, you'll have whatever glorified darkness, but as far as kids go, it's put on a costume, go get some candy, maybe get creeped out by something, but I think it's probably a lot safer for kids these days.
From the looks of this, definitely. I'm still kind of
Blown
shocked
away?
about the whole bonfire scene.
No, you would find more of the history of Halloween to be interesting, but that's not necessarily a super happy rabbit hole to fall down into. It needs to be said. One of my favorite things about this scene, Katie makes a cake for Halloween.
Oh, yes.
And I have this thing about gorgeous food, especially cake on movies. It's probably 3 tiers, pink icing, totally decorated to the hilt. It is a thing of beauty. And they have ice cream too. And it's just one of the most delightful parts of this film.
A little moment of brightness in a dark scene.
But there's humor injected throughout this whole thing.
Yes.
So while this sounds really dark, there's humor all over the place.
It's like dark humor, basically.
The really sobering part of this scene is when the dad comes home and gives his wife candy, and then she wants to know what's up, which is also a problem, fellas. Like, just give your wife presents all the time so she won't think that something's up. Anyway, something is up. He's been offered a job in New York, and he's all excited about it. And she's like, well, we can get along without you for a few months or whatever. She said, no, he wants to move everyone. Yeah, what does the grandpa say?
You'll be safe with me. I've got 12 guns in my room.
And now, the dad is basically oblivious to everybody's lives. He's a good guy. He's out there providing, but he doesn't realize how emotionally significant this place is to his family. You have Esther, who's really got it bad for this guy, definitely would want to marry him down the line. The kids have their friends, their life. The St. Louis World's Fair is coming up, and they've all got their hearts set on it. All of these things, which to him, he's not paying any attention.
He comes home, he's acting like he's expecting everyone to be supremely overjoyed.
Yeah,
and
because
very not.
Because he's gotten a promotion in his work, and in his mind, he's probably moving them to an exciting new adventure with even more money to take care of them. Which, honestly, the house that they're in, it's a Second Empire Victorian. It's gorgeous. They are not hurting at all.
I was thinking to myself, like, they're super rich, but then they're talking about how they'll be poor and have to live in an apartment when they move to New York. And I'm like, their house is practically a mansion right now.
He's a lawyer. He's making good money. But in their mind, it probably wouldn't matter if they were moving to a mansion. Their hearts are in their home. And the wife is getting all upset, and nobody's happy. Everybody's losing their appetite, and
I have some other quotes from Tootie about this whole thing too.
Oh, yes.
Tootie's like my favorite, even though she's horrible in that one scene. She's my favorite.
She's memorable.
She's talking about how all her dolls, and her dolls a lot of them have apparently died, and she says it'll take me at least a week to dig all my dolls out of the cemetery. And then she later says that she'd rather go with the orphelins at the orphelins home.
There's another part where she's talking about how she wants to tunnel under the yards.
Oh yeah, I wrote that one down too. I'm starting a tunnel tomorrow from our garden, right under the streetcar tracks and into Mrs. Middleton's terrace. Then while she's walking around her lawn someday, I'll grab her by the leg.
And I'm not going till I'm finished. Don't use that tone with your father. She's just stating a fact.
This child is something else.
So everybody gets upset. Different people are wandering off or leaving, however you want to put it. And the wife, good woman that she is, decides, if this is what you think is best for us, we will support you. And she gives him his piece of cake and starts playing one of their songs, and they sing together, and everybody comes in, and they're a family again. They're working their way through the shock.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she's totally the rock of the family.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to go on this whole journey with him where he just does not... It takes a while for him to realize how much decision is affecting his family. So you have to hang in there with him.
Yeah, the next scene after this is the next season, winter of 1903.
Cue music.
And I guess this is the whole thing where people think it's a Christmas movie, because it is very Christmassy throughout this whole next section. It's just only one section of the movie, so...
Yeah.
Anyway, it starts with them making snowmen. Well, snow people, as they call them.
Yeah.
And I just find it kind of humorous, because these snow people are very obviously not made of snow.
I never thought about that. Never, ever.
They're very obviously made of some sort of material that is not snow.
Could they have been like decorated styrofoam?
I don't think it was styrofoam. I'm thinking it was probably some kind of a flour paste because of a scene that we'll get to later. I don't think styrofoam would have reacted in the way that...
They needed them to last.
Yes, that's true. And that's why they would have done it. But
I never thought about that.
I'm pretty sure they also filmed this on a soundstage and not outside anyway.
And this scene is a bit significant because they've made a snowman they call Lucille Ballard, which is Lonnie's interest, and
I didn't realize that was the girlfriend's name, so I just found it hilarious that they would name a snowman something so specific. This snow person is Lucille Ballard.
So this is important because Warren and Lucille are going to the dance together, and Lonnie and Rose both probably feel like they've been left out in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And
was there a reason that they went together? I didn't really understand why they were going together. Were they dating each other?
Maybe it's probably just classic young people dating around and trying to figure out their feelings and all that stuff.
Because later you could tell that they weren't serious about each other.
No.
So there was no reason for...
Who knows? Maybe he and Rose had a little quarrel or something. Who knows? But their relationship hadn't been, like, really, to use a modern word, really hardcore earlier in the movie because she was thinking, oh, this doctor is cute, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I don't think they're really happy about it, and the family is trying to convince them to just go with each other. And Esther's like, well, if you're not going to go, then I won't go. And then the maid has this frozen underwear that she's gotten off the clothesline, and she's brandishing it at Rose.
I don't think I realized that that's what that was.
You're thinking about the fake snowman. I'm fixated on the freeze-dried underwear.
There's a lot of little details to notice.
That's quite the quote right there. They decide, because they're a loving family, Lonnie asks Rose if she would like to go to the dance with him, and they work it out that way. Well, then another problem happens after they've struggled their way into their nasty corsets.
Yeah, Judy Garland really sold the pain of that corset. I don't know if she was actually in pain, but if she wasn't, she deserved an Oscar for that scene because you believed that she was in pain.
And also, probably very accurate depiction of the times. I mean, women are still wearing highly elasticized garments. Our gender is not over that yet. People talk about corsets. It's like there are still women wearing corsets, and there are still women wearing, Spanx? Corsetry, it used to be that it started at least in childhood. Yes, children were corseted, and also pregnant women had their own special corsets. corseting is a problem. Like,
You can't see this on the podcast. We're not doing video, but I'm giving her a very surprised and skeptical look because why would someone do a corset on a pregnant woman?
I suppose maybe this is part of my interest in fashion history where I learn, and just olden times where I learned this type of stuff, but it's kind of a bizarre thing.
Apparently, I'd never heard of pregnant women wearing corsets. It seems like it would be dangerous for the baby.
You would think, yes. But people are so attached to these things. And even today, highly elasticized garments, depending on the garment, it can still pose potential health issues. Just take good care of yourself and wear flattering clothing and just forget about it, because it's not worth it to potentially warp your insides, wreck your appetite. You know, if you care that much about your posture, strengthen your muscles. But anyway, that was a very long ramble about a tiny part of this movie.
Well, it was a memorable part because
we're
like
helping.
I said,
this is the history, folks.
Well, she really sold that corset.
And really, it is. There are still modern corsets, and you can wear a modern corset or you can get a historically accurate corset. And the corseting is different for different types of dresses in different periods of history. So it's not all the same thing. Anyway, wow.
Where were we? After the corsets.
Yeah, a huge problem arises. Oh my goodness. The world is crumbling apart. John Truitt played basketball too late and didn't get his tuxedo out from the tailors. So he has nothing to wear to the party.
When I was watching this, I was like, these people dress like they're going to church 24/7. Why can't he just wear one of his nice everyday suits? Because they seem nice enough to me.
Because everybody else would be in a tuxedo, and then he would look like he just showed up in shorts and a t-shirt.
Apparently. But it just seems kind of... It's another thing of the differences between the times, because everyone dressed so nicely just for everyday wear.
Yeah. Her tennis outfit was very frilly, probably the right word. This turns into a mini family crisis because then she doesn't want Lonnie to take her as well as Rose. She thinks that's going to be an embarrassment to the family, and then Rose is upset, but the grandfather comes to the rescue, and he's going to take Esther to the dance, which for some reason is more okay with her than having her much younger male relative take her, but it's sweet because they're all supporting each other. And then they hatch a plot to get back at Lucille Ballard for being with Warren Sheffield.
Another thing I wanted to note in this scene, just because it's completely random and unrelated to everything else that happened, Agnes comes in at one point and says, "Rose, what did you get me for Christmas? You'll find out tomorrow. I hope it's a hunting knife."
Typical. Every little girl I've ever known wants a hunting knife for Christmas.
I just cracked up. Tootie didn't get every single line.
I don't know what happened with the two youngest in this family.
I wonder if all of the children were this wild, or if they just kind of let things go after the third one.
I can't really see Rose being that way. Maybe Esther, but...
Anyway, Lucille Ballard.
Yes, they're going to get back at her by filling out her dance card. Dance card meaning you are going to dance this dance with a certain partner throughout the evening. You know, this dance, this person, this dance, the other person. They're going to fill it up with the most undesirable males they can find at this party. You know, one of them looks like he's like 12 or something.
Yeah.
And then while Esther's off flitting around doing that, Lucille comes along and very sweetly says, you know, we're all grown-ups. And she felt that Rose and Warren really ought to be there together, and then
Mhm.
she and Lonnie paired up. She obviously had discerned where everybody's interests
Mhm.
really lay.
And this is where I'm like, why didn't they just ask each other in the first place if everybody knew who everybody liked?
Because people make bad decisions.
Apparently.
Well, speaking of bad decisions, Esther flits along, and then Rose is telling her the plan has been changed. So she's stuck with this dance card, and she decides to be nice and hands over her
Mhm.
more desirable dance card to Lucille. And she's stuck with all of the lemons. And the grandfather finds out about what was going on. But Esther, it's really a bad rap for Esther because Rose gets to go off and just be happy for the rest of the evening while Esther dances with all of these interesting people.
Like they were doing this quote unquote evil plan on Rose's behalf, and Rose doesn't have to deal with the consequences at all.
Yeah, it's another injustice in this movie, but we can tolerate it. It's still lighthearted. And finally, the grandfather steps in and gets her away from this
tiny child.
Yes. And tells her that he's proud of her. And then at some point, and she's saying, "You're the first human being I've danced with all night." At some point, you see the grandfather smile and work his way back behind the Christmas tree, and John Truitt had somehow managed to get a hold of his tuxedo, and he takes over, and everybody's having a good time then. And then after the dance, John proposes to her, and they're basically having this whole conversation about how, he won't go to college, he'll get a job right away, and, she won't be going off to St. Louis, and they'll just be together.
New York.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he made it sound like they would move to New York together. Like he would move with her family.
Okay. But either way, he's giving up what he had planned to do because he wants to be with her, and she's starting to feel like, you can tell that she's torn, that she really wants to be with him, but she's not sure about him giving up on college, and it's just this sort of sad note that they end on because she doesn't really feel like she can commit to marrying him, even though she really wants to commit to marrying him. And they're still very, very young.
Yeah, because she's not even out of high school.
And theoretically, if you move states away, you can maintain that relationship and make it happen, but they're having a hard time with the idea of keeping this relationship together. You can tell that this is a struggle for them. And she has a really cute, sparkly little headscarf on, which has nothing to do with this, but it's one of the nice fashion choices of this movie. So things have gotten pitiful. Rose is happy, Lonnie's happy, but Esther, the main character, is having a real deal struggle with whether this relationship is going to work out, and she really wants to be with him. And she goes inside after this party. Tootie's up waiting for Santa, and...
Because she's afraid that he won't find them if they move.
Really?
She's talking about how she needs to tell him where they're going.
Oh, so was she waiting up to tell him?
It seems like she's waiting to make sure that Santa knows that they won't be there next year. They're going to be in New York, and she doesn't know how he's going to know if she doesn't let him know.
And doesn't Judy Garland, Esther, try and reassure her that...
Yeah, he'll find them no matter where they go.
Yeah. And then she sings one of the most iconic songs while turning this little music box. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. And this was nearly not an iconic Christmas song because when the guy... Maybe that's an exaggeration. When the guy originally wrote this, he did not make it a positive song. It was the same tune, but he was basically singing that something like all of our good times would be in the past.
It was
all about how pitiful their lives were.
It was probably because in this scene she's not that happy with the way she left things off, and Tootie is not happy at all because she's talking about not being able to take her snow people with her. Like, she's talking about taking the dolls, but she's gonna have to leave the snow people behind. And she had another good line in here too. I'm taking all my dolls, the dead ones too.
Which I think she was trying to be brave and positive, but originally when this guy wrote it, he made the lyrics really, really pitiful. And I don't think that would have really, I mean, unless somebody was joking about it, I don't think it would have really stuck around if he had. But instead, he made it this whole song about being together and being hopeful and being reunited. And now everybody knows it. And at the end of this song, Tootie gets so worked up and
like,
sad,
really worked up,
that she's bawling, and she runs outside and she is beating the snow people to death because she can't take them with her.
I wrote this quote down too. Nobody can have them. I've got to kill them if we can't take them with us.
She'd rather have them dead than not have them.
And she's really selling the emotion in this because she's like hysterically sobbing while she's doing this. She's just literally in hysterics, beating these things to death.
And Judy's telling her, you know who I'm talking about at this point. Esther is telling her how lucky they are to be moving to New York and being really brave and positive, and takes her back upstairs. And the dad is witnessing some of what's going on. And he goes into the living room for a smoke. And then it's just like it's all dawning on him that this was a terrible idea. And then he starts yelling, and he wants everybody to come into the living room and saying that they're not going to New York, and that if the company doesn't like it, then that's too bad. And so everybody is really, really happy at this point. And then Warren Sheffield comes bursting into the house, and he's decided that they're going to get married as soon as possible, and he doesn't want to hear any arguments about it. I love you! And then he storms out again, and Rose is like, Merry Christmas. And then Alonzo Sr. is like, Anna, who was that boy? Because he's that out of touch. And then she probably said that he was a nice young man, and then everybody was happy, and the mother sort of wanders off, and you can tell she's maybe a little bit misty-eyed, and the husband comes up behind her and I think maybe puts his hand on her shoulder, and they're having this little moment of recognition of her feelings and him being compassionate about. Like, they don't say anything. You can just tell what's going on in their hearts, and it's really sweet. And everybody's happy in the background. And
well, I was wondering, I mean, I'm sure there was like so many emotions going on here, which is why she was crying. But like, my first thought was, so is she now not happy that they're not moving?
No, she's relieved.
Okay, because
she is that. Those were tears of relief, like, we are staying in our home. I don't have to go, because she had been being brave to support him. She did not want to leave. So he was recognizing in his body language how significant this was to her too, and that he understood now. Yeah. So, yeah, nice little moment together. After that, it is
spring 1904.
Yes, time for the fair. And John is there. They're all going to the fair together, which was sort of the point of the whole movie. It's kind of split between the family story and the fair, but it's just sort of revolves around the fair.
Yeah, the fair was like everything was working towards the fair.
Yes.
Because it was always sort of in the background, like it would be mentioned as something for the future every once in a while.
But you have to realize that this fair really was a big deal. So much effort. So it's not like it was just some random fair that they revolved a movie around. I can't remember whether Ferris wheels debuted there or not. Okay, so they're there, and they're all dressed up to the nines. I think maybe wearing white. They might have all been wearing white. It's really really beautiful. And then all of the electric lights come on and they're talking about, our hometown. And this was just like this wonderful, proud moment. They were all so happy together. And it basically ends there with everybody being happy at the fair. This has absolutely, practically nothing to do with this movie. But I just want to mention, in real deal life, those electric lights at the fair were a huge deal. It was, I think, very revolutionary for the time. Like, in their house, they had probably a combination of gas and electric. Electric was still fairly early, but I think maybe just the sheer volume or the way the electric lights were set up. And at the end of the movie, one of the big things is all the electric lights coming on at the fair.
I mean, I guess this is kind of basically the end. There's just scenes of them just kind of doing things at the fair.
Well, really, it ends, I think, with them, it really ends with them all gathered together, watching the electric lights coming on and speaking, like Rose is speaking with pride, this is our hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And then the song Meet Me in St. Louis starts playing, and I think you have the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't end with anybody getting married or anything. You just know that everybody ended up in happy relationships and stayed in their hometown.
Yeah, it was basically just a way to show that everybody was back together as a whole functioning happy family at the end.
Yeah. And John was there, so you know that things were okay with John.
Mm-hmm. And that's about it.
So yeah, I'd say I can't attest to how much they would have altered it from the book and how much the book was altered from reality. But I know that the story was roughly based in reality. So I'd say keep that in mind as you're watching it. Keep it in mind as a historically interesting film. It's also just a very amusing, cute film that I'd say puts a pretty positive light on loving family relationships. And it's just kind of a cozy movie to watch, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah. If you associate it with Christmas, fine. I'd say watch it anytime if you want.
Yeah, I'd say it's good anytime because there's a scene for every season, really.
Yeah. Pretty lighthearted, pretty sweet. I really love the song that the mother sings, You and I, and the harmony and everything. So it has its charms.
Yeah, I'd never seen it before, like last year, I think. Did we watch it at Christmas? I can't remember.
I don't think so.
But sometime we watched it last year and it's grown on me. I really got into it watching it again for this.
I think I just played it for you because I found out that you hadn't watched it.
Probably.
I was probably quoting it or something, and then we probably rabbit trailed from there. So as far as old movies, this is one of the better ones that you can watch. It doesn't have the darkness of film noir. It actually has some depth to it, and it's just, like I say, it's a cozy film.
Thanks again to Sarah for joining me for this episode. I always enjoy getting her perspective on some of these older movies. Thank you all for joining me for this first installment of Christmas in July on the iHeart podcast. I started this series last year on my YouTube channel, and I've loved doing it, so I think I'll definitely have to do it again next year. This past month has been a lot of work, but also a lot of fun. I had 2 brand new guests on the show. I put out 4 full episodes and 3 bonus episodes, and altogether we've talked about 12 different Christmas movies. Next month I think I'll be trying to take it a bit easier. I think I'm going to take a break for a week or 2, but when we come back, my friend Eli will be joining me, this time to talk about a movie that he's been wanting to discuss for almost a year now, the 1922 silent film Nosferatu. It's always fun to talk to Eli, so make sure to come back next time for another episode of the iHeart podcast.